So I was born and raised in the Wairarapa, and then moved over here for high school, and I've been here ever since. I live in a really amazing house in Newtown. There's a big pink house there, which is like, it's a house, but it's also like a community. And I used to live in Garrett Street, which is the house that Mark and Sophie lived in, and that's like the same thing. It's like another community of like people that are trying to do something more than just live. And like Gina said, I'm involved with Lumio. I'm one of the co-founders of Lumio, and I'm a member at Inspiral, and I'm involved with an arts collective called Concerned Citizens that run a community space in Tory Street. And all of these groups of people, like they're all action-based groups that are trying to do something, and they, like, my identity is like the composition of all those groups, and I guess the reason I'm working on Lumio is because there's something about that group identity thing and having multiple groups that for me is like it's where I get my strength from, and my like confidence and like ability to get up in the morning and do stuff is because I'm held by these different groups. And the work I'm doing is like trying to help other people find their groups, start their groups, do their group thing. So yeah, the 3 hard steps. Number 1 is find something worth holding on to and hold on to it. And for me, the way to hold on to it is to write it down. And when you write it down, you actually have to force the words out, and you have to show those words to other people and see what they think. And there's a lot of fun and hard work involved in that. And number 2 is do everything with fun and love and colour and cups of tea. And I call that prioritising the vibe. It means it should feel good when you're doing it. And then number 3 is hold on to the first thing that you wrote down and then throw everything else out every single day. It's about trying everything. So I'll run through each of those steps in a bit of detail. The first one, finding something worth holding on to. Takes a long time. And from what I know about Lifehack, it's like a lot of people that come to Lifehack are looking for that thing to hold on to. They know they haven't found it yet, and they're like, seems like maybe somewhere down this way is like my thing that I want to hold on to. And for me, it was like I said, I moved over here for high school. Got to the end of high school, and I went to the careers advisor, and she said to me, "What are you good at?" And I said, "Maths and science." She said, "We should go study engineering." And so I said, okay, and then I went to university and I studied engineering. And then 4 years later, I graduated engineering school with an engineering degree. And it was 2008 when I graduated, and that was just when the global economy went nuts and there was no jobs available, especially in engineering in New Zealand. And so I suddenly was out into the world without school, without uni, without a job, without a boss or anyone really telling me what to do. And for the first time, I had to actually just stop and think, what do I want to do? And it's a bit weird waiting until I was 22 to ask myself that question, but I got there in the end. And it's a question when I'm invited to talk at universities, I'm always just if there's one thing you do at university, it's figure out what you're into. Don't worry about all the grades and stuff like that. That's totally irrelevant. I got great grades in a degree that I don't care about. That has no value to me whatsoever. And I didn't figure out what I was into until after I left. So when I left, I was sitting there with time on my hands, because that's what's the great thing about being on the dole, is you have as much time as you need. And somehow it finally clicked. 4 years late. I'm a musician, and I know how to make electronics. Maybe I could make electronics for musicians. Total light bulb moment, strike of the blinding obvious. And I just wish that someone had kind of prompted me to think about that 4 years sooner, but so it was. And so I got started making electronic devices, basically weird noise machines for weirdos that like weird noise machines. And was really surprised to find that other people really got a kick out of that stuff that I was making. So I'd build something, I'd put it on the internet, and then someone would see it and be like, that's awesome, can I buy it? I'm like, oh, okay. And so then started making a whole bunch of these random weird machines, and then eventually quite awesome musicians would come to me and be like, hey, can you you know, they're trying to commission me to make stuff for them. So I got into like doing stuff on spec and building crazy machines, you know, like for people to use on stage. I was working with Ricky Gooch, and he was like, I'm on stage, I've got a lot of electronic equipment, it's so lame to be here with my knobs and buttons, like I want something that's more theatrical, and so I made him a device that like picks up his arm movements and like translates it into his computer. Like that's like, what awesome work, you know, what totally awesome work. Yeah, it's a real buzz doing that kind of stuff, like just to kind of facilitate someone else's dream and to get to work on my skills and that sort of stuff. That was really awesome. And then from that got into like teaching people about electronics as well, because it's one of those subjects that's like really hard for people to get into, but it shouldn't be, because it's actually really easy. It's just they teach it the wrong way, kind of like maths. It's like they make it sound really hard, but it's not. They just teach you all the dumb stuff that you don't need to know and divorce it from your real life. So I was teaching because it was fun to show people like, hey, these things are electrons and you can play with them. Electrons are awesome. Electrons are your friend. Apart from if you have too many of them. And then I guess, you know, like that was fun. I was having a lot of fun. I wasn't really making enough money to live on, but I was kind of scraping by. And something in me was just like, still wasn't quite full. Like it was good fun stuff to work on, but it didn't really like, I was just like, do I really want to spend my whole life making products, like physical? Do we need more electronic junk in the world? Like, it just didn't, you know, it just wasn't quite there. It was awesome and it was motivating and people liked it, but it just wasn't quite the whole thing. And then I met Ben, and Ben's another person from Garrett Street, these folk. And yeah, meeting Ben was like a moment, you know, in my life where it just sort of like, oh, turned a bit of a corner, because he's like the most like, he's just universally positive about everything. Like, it's like every time I see him, he's like, oh, I just met the most amazing person, and I'm like, you mean you just met a person? He's just set with this like really high default for everything. It's really awesome to be around, and it kind of rubbed off on me, and it made me more like. I paid more attention now to like positive stuff when I used to be real cynical and dark and stuff all the time. And him and his partner Hannah and a bunch of others, we got involved with this thing called the Concerned Citizens, which is like this arts collective that was putting on creative events that have some kind of social benefit. So like we'd host an art exhibition, raise a bunch of money and give it to a women's refuge or something like that, you know. So like really, really simple format, but that was my sort of first taste of like, oh, there's something beyond just me and my weird interests. There's like a whole world out there, and I can combine my interests with doing some positive impact. And that was really fun. And through the sequence, you know, like that sort of thing was like hosting events, really. That was the work of it. And from that, you know, meeting so many more people that were sort of on the same wavelength, like I want to do something good in the world. And then from that, hopped on down to when Occupy Wall Street arrived in Wellington, Ben and Hannah and I and John and a bunch of others, we got involved with Occupy. And Occupy was my first experience of like practically like sitting in a circle with people. Like I don't think I'd ever done that before, for starters. Like it's real basic, right? But it's a good thing to practice, sitting in a circle. And then not just sitting, but talking to each other, you know, and doing that kind of talking where one person speaks and everyone else listens. And then when they're finished, it's the next person's turn to talk, and one person speaks and everyone listens. You know, I'd never been exposed to that before. And then out of that conversation, you know, not just talking for the sake of it, actually trying to make decisions, trying to get somewhere, trying to go like, we're a community of people that have for some reason decided to live in the middle of the city for a couple of months. How are we going to operate? How are we going to feed people? Like, how are we going to come up with shelter that can, you know, our crappy $40 tent from the warehouse doesn't actually work for more than 2 weeks when you're parked up in Civic Square. And so we had to make all kinds of decisions together about like how we're going to structure our little community. And we sort of took it for granted, like it was there when I arrived, that there was no boss, you know, that there was no one in charge. We were going to figure it out together. And we figured it out by sitting in circles and talking it out until it was done. And you know, there was a little real like minor little dash of tikanga to make that work. So we had hand signals like, you know, yes I agree with what you're saying, no I don't, or like hell no I don't. And that process was like I said, it was my first time seeing that happen and participating in that. And it, yeah, like I said, meeting Ben was like a little corner in my life. Like this was a full-on U-turn, you know, like this was like totally redirected the course of events for me. And it's just so it just reset my understanding of what individuals are capable of and what groups are capable of. Because prior to that, I'd just seen decisions being made by someone in charge, being like, right, we're doing this, go do that, go do that, go do that. And then people kind of grumbling in the background, being like, oh, this sucks, that person doesn't know what they're talking about. And to see people just like figure it out together, and every, you know, like creating a space where everyone's voice is actually valuable, and noticing that when you throw in everyone's voice, you actually come up with something that's better than any individual would have had on their own. That was totally mind-blowing for me, you know. And at the same time as that was awesome and like massively inspiring, it's also like so frustrating to have to sit in a room for like, well, not even in a room, we're out in Pacific Square, so sit around outside in the cold for like 4 or 5 hours trying to make a decision sometimes, because it's like sometimes there's some real complex stuff you've got to work through. It was just like, this isn't realistic, like no one's going to do this. People have got jobs and kids, and like, how do we, so we were stuck with this question, like how do we share this experience but actually make it fit in the kind of modern world we live in? And another flash of the obvious was that we should try and put it on the internet, you know, make it so that people can have that experience where they can talk to each other and, you know, respect the different kinds of opinions and different perspectives, and try and develop consensus together without having to be in the same room at the same time, so they can just participate on their own time. So with that idea, we got introduced to Enspiral. We didn't know what Enspiral was. I still don't really. It's been 3.5 years. It was just like someone told me, they like technology and they want to make the world better. I was like, oh, sounds like us. And we went to them and we were like, hey, we've got this idea. We want to do the Occupy decision thing, but on the internet. Can you build that for us? And they said, no. But it's a good idea. Like, we love the idea and we really want that, because Enspiral is this big group of people that doesn't have a boss as well, and they wanted to make decisions online. They're like, we're not going to build it for you, but we'll help. You know, we'll help you build it. You build it. You're going to have to figure out how to build it, and we'll help you. And so they gave us some space and connections. They just like kept throwing people at us all the time. Just a consistent stream of people like Chelsea. And over time, that sort of like the idea and the space and the people kind of, they stuck, you know, they stuck. And what they stuck around was the purpose. That's why my step one is like, write something down, figure out what your purpose is. Like, that's the thing that we stuck to. And in the last 3.5 years of working on the software, you know, now we've got 90,000 something people using it in 100 countries and 32 languages. And there's so many decisions to be made along the way, you know, to do that, to navigate through that space to get to that point. And all the way through, when you get to a hard decision, you just look at what we wrote down and our purpose, you know. Why are we here? Well, then all the decisions make themselves, you know. You just go back to why are we here, and you can really, you'll find it's like the guiding light, it's the navigator that we don't need a boss, we've got a purpose, you know. So I said these are hard steps, you know. Finding your purpose is like super hard, and I noticed that my purpose actually keeps evolving all the time, and I've got to keep rechecking in on it. What am I doing now? What am I doing now? But it's just like, yeah, it's number one for a reason. It's the most important thing. Point number 2, you know, step number 2 is do everything with fun and love and colour and cups of tea. I'm a big believer in cups of tea, and the whole thing for me, I call it prioritize the vibe. The thing about the vibe is like, when I walked in, well, before I even walked in actually, when I got off my bike at the gate and started walking up the hill, it's like, this place has got some vibe, you know? and then come around the corner and you can see this incredible building, you're like, wow, that building's got some vibe. There's some real vibe in there. Like, this is DIY fortress architecture and I love it. And then I stepped in the door, you know, and I could see, I was a bit early, and people were still in there working, and I could see there's some vibe getting cooked. You're all like, everyone's putting their thing in the room, you know, and it's such a privilege to have that experience. It's awesome that Lifehack can like host that kind of experience for people, and the Lifehack crew. I mean, I couldn't imagine a better crew to be cultivating that vibe for people. But you know it, right? It feels good in your tummy. It feels good to be here. And you can keep that good feeling pretty much all the time if you pay attention to it. And you've got to pay attention to your tummy. That's the thing. That's like, I've got my head brain, my heart brain and my tummy brain. And my tummy brain tells me when the vibe's right. And what that actually means in practice, it's like, it means that in our workplace, we respect feelings. Feelings are legitimate information. And they're just like, emotions for me, they're like, they're just like inarticulate expression, It's like, your emotion is trying to tell you something and maybe you haven't got the best awesome way to say it yet, but it's just like, I'm real stressed out about something, and it's like, it's really critical information. Like if you're trying to work together as a group to achieve something, you actually need to have that information in the room with you. You can't pretend that it's not there. And a lot of workplaces you try and pretend like I haven't got feelings. Like I left them at home, like I'm at work now and I've got my special uniform on that says no feelings. And we've said, nah, we're having your feelings. Please bring all your feelings are welcome here, and we're going to work with you to, make space for them. And it's real simple stuff. I mean, you probably already practiced it here, I'm sure. Like, just sitting in a circle and hearing from everyone. Doesn't have to be major, doesn't have to be like an amazing speech or anything. It's just like hearing people's voices. Hear like what the quality of the voice, there's a little shake. This person's nervous, they're anxious, And it gives you so much information to just hear from each person one by one. Little practices like that, really, really simple stuff that like allows people to arrive fully and allows you to have like full context about what they're doing. So we do that all the time. Any meeting at Lumio, if we're talking about the business model or the capital raising or the software development, like we'll start with a check-in, Like it's really important if like someone's got some strong feelings, you need to know about that. If it's like my dog got run over, like that's still relevant information because it's like, well, maybe you should take the day off, And if it's like, I'm actually feeling really anxious about the cash flow, like that's really, really important feelings to bring in because then we can work together to fix the cash flow. And we've seen it happen like over and over again at Lumio where we'll just start, it'll be just like a mundane kind of regular meeting, and we'll start and we'll hear from people, and someone will just say something real like, they can't put their finger on it, but they're like, oh, I just feel a bit uneasy. Like, don't know what it is, don't worry about me. I think I'm having a weird day, something, don't know. And then they'll sit back and the next person will be like, I'm the same, yeah. I kind of anxious, kind of doesn't feel real good, vibe's not right. And then they sit back and the next person will be like, yeah, I've actually been thinking, and they might have a little bit more detail and they'll be like, that strategy that we signed on to 2 months ago, like it was awesome at the time, but I'm starting to really question it, like it doesn't seem right. And you go around the circle, and by the time you get to the end of the circle, you realise like, oh, that work that we did where we planned out where we're going, it was wrong. Like no one feels good about it. We're only doing it because everyone else thinks it's a good idea. And by having space for people to be inarticulate and not have to be like awesome and make a real compelling argument, you actually get to the heart of the matter real quickly. You don't have to like wait till you get to the end of that plan and realise, oh, that was a dumb plan. You're allowed to just say like, this doesn't feel right. You're allowed to like, you're allowed to like, we respect the tummy brain and the heart brain as well as the head brain. They're all good brains. And then number 3, the third hard step is to hold on to that first thing, right? The one that you wrote down, and then throw everything else out all the time. Keep throwing it out, because most of your ideas are not very good. I'm really sorry about that. Same with mine. Most of my ideas are not very good either. And in software development land, we're really lucky because we've got users. Like I said, there's like 90-something thousand people using the software now. So we don't have to worry about what our ideas are. We just listen to their ideas, and they say we need this. We go, okay, we'll make it. And we've got all kinds of process and structure around like how do we try everything. It's like we want to try lots of different stuff. We want to hold on to our purpose and throw everything else out and try. And it's like you need to have some kind of system, because otherwise you've got like there's 17 people in the co-op now, and you have 17 people like all trying different things. It doesn't work, right? You need to be systematic. So we've got a lot of different sort of like containers, I guess, for going, okay, well, for this 3-month period, we're looking at this area, this is what we're trying, and this week, we're going to try this part of this problem, you sort of break it down and say we're looking at this part. So we really kind of try to hold loose to our own ideas. They're all hypotheses, and it's like, okay, I've got a hypothesis, how am I going to test it? And it's funny, when you say I'm just testing this idea out, it's really, somehow it frees you up, it makes it really easy. You don't have to be like, you don't have to be arguing your case and be like, this is what we need to do. It's like, I think this is my reasoning, and this is how I'm going to test it and prove whether or not it's a good idea. And that's a real easy way to sort of get a group of people to sort of think together and learn together and go in the same direction together, is because it's like, quite often different people are going to have different opinions. And so it's like, well, you can design the experiment together, you know, you can go like, okay, I don't agree with your hypothesis, and this is how I'm going to disprove it, you know, and that's fine, like that's really productive. And the way that we can hold that kind of space for that productive tension is because we prioritize the vibe. So that means everyone is actually quite capable of communicating to each other and being like, you know, holding a different opinion. And it's okay that your perspective is different from mine, it's different from yours, different from mine, it's different from yours. It's okay, like we've all got a different one, and we can just hold them together. And there's this sort of, we have this baseline, you know, we've got our purpose, and all of our feet are sort of like, they're like old roots of a tree, like grown into that purpose. And we've got that, we're like an old married couple of 17 people. And they're all growing together. And it's like, we're all like playing footsies under the table or something. And we can be disagreeing with each other up here, but down there it's all like, we're all knitted together. Because that's the thing that put us together in the first place. So those are the 3 hard steps to do anything. What's the time check, Gina?
Just after 2. We've got about 8 minutes or so. Any thoughts from anyone? Any questions?
Great story, thank you.
How do you define your purpose now?
Well, it's actually going through a sort of little process at the moment. But the one that we agreed to, that we wrote down, that's on the wall in the office, is we're here to make a world where it's easy for anyone to participate in decisions that affect them. And you know, each of those words means a lot to me. You know, all easy, anyone, participate, affect, like all of those things. There's so much work under all of those words, and it took such a crazy amount of work to get those words agreed. You know, lots of different workshops, and like, it's like, you know, like I said, I sort of told you my story about how I came to my purpose, and then you got all these other people, and they've got their own totally different story, and then to find words that you can find the overlap between where everyone's like core kind of motivation comes from, like it's really, really hard work, and you've got to prioritize that, and it takes a lot of time. I think in the real first stages of a new collaborative project, you can kind of get away with it without having it written down, without being too specific. You've just got like enthusiasm and lots of vibe, and that'll get you through. But before the enthusiasm runs out, you've got to like write something down.
So did you start with 17?
No, we started with 6.
So what happens when the vision is set by 6 and then, or 10, and then it keeps growing? And
I can share because I was one of the not 6.
Yeah.
It was probably like 8 or 10.
Yeah.
And it was largely an experience of walking in the door, reading the wall and going, cool, I'm home.
oh yeah.
It was like,
So you buy into the vision that's been set.
well, I guess every single person that's shown up since then went on their own journey to realise the same thing,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, those are the words, yeah.
Cool.
And I mean, it wasn't like 6 people went away and wrote it down as well. It was
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Yeah.
the product of a lot of conversations with a lot of people.
I can only imagine.
Did you talk about the stewardship model?
Sure, yeah. I'm glad you asked, because I had a note to say that and I didn't. So one of the things about the vibe is, you know, this idea that we actually pay attention to how everyone's feeling and make it our job that people should feel as good as we can make them feel. You know, sometimes there's shit going on that you can't fix, but and because, like I said, we don't have a boss, sometimes that can get tricky, not having a boss, because the boss is a really good person to turn to if you're having a hard time, right? You go, boss, I need some time off. My dog ran over my girlfriend or something. And so we haven't got a boss, and instead we've got this thing called the stewards. So up until recently, actually, Chelsea was my steward, I was Alana's steward, Alana was James's steward, James was, and it goes around in a circle like this. And so if I have an issue, I can go to Chelsea and be like, Chelsea, I'm freaking out, you know, or more frequently actually, it's like there's some kind of conflict comes up, because that happens all the time. People with productive conflict, and it can get a little bit sticky, and it's like, I don't want to just you and me nut this out. I actually want some support, and so Chelsea would be the one that would come in and support me, and she'd be the like, her job is just to support. She doesn't got an opinion about the actual argument. She's just there to make sure that I'm okay, and that's awesome. It's really awesome to have that there, and awesome to be that for someone else as well. And that's the, like, as far as organisational structure stuff goes, that's the number one for me, actually, I think. Like, in the last couple of weeks, I've been involved with some really, really hard work. Like, we had a big pot of money, and we had to split it up between a bunch of people. And there's actually more people, the big little sharp intake of breath over there. There's more people with more claims on the money than there is money to go around, you know. And it was me and two others that were in charge of making the decision about where the money had to go. And because there was more claims than there was money, that meant some of them were going to get disappointed, you know, and that meant I had to like push back on people a little bit. And in that work over the course of that 2 weeks, I realised that like I'm not prepared to push back on someone unless that I know that they've got someone behind them, like catching them, you know. And so my first job for the first 2 weeks was like make sure that everyone's got someone standing behind them, and then it was like, okay, now it's time to push. You know, and we pushed and we got to a place, and everyone at the end of it, everyone goes, "This is a good result. We can all see this is the, you know, we all agree with like the process and all that. Yes, I'm personally disappointed, but I'm also personally supported." So instead of it being like some random boss turning up and being like, "This is the decision, go deal with the feelings," it was like we made sure that the feelings were looked after first.
What's your views on kind of the size of the group that all these things can work with?
There's a lot of people who will tell you a lot of different things about group size, and so far I haven't developed a strong opinion about any of them. Apart from that, I don't trust any of the ones that are like 15 is exactly the number, you know. And whatever processes you use totally have to be context specific. You have to realize what size group you're working in. So like the difference between collaborating with 7 people and 9 people is totally different. It's totally different. And that's why there's no recipe that you can just get on the internet and go like how to run a group of 7 people. Like it's so context dependent, and that just means that's why the prioritize the vibe thing. It's like pay attention. Like, is this working? No, it's not. Well, let's change it. You know. And so with our structure and our processes have changed so many times. It makes it really hard when someone turns up for the first time and like, what the? That's kind of why Inspiral is really hard to explain as well, because it's changing so much all the time. But it's changing because it's growing, you know, and it's adapting to the position that it's in.
Have you ever lost the vibe?
So, I mean, the vibe comes and goes, right? Like, what I've noticed, so we just had this workshop on Wednesday, and it was about like stress and stuff like that, and totally outside of work, and it really just, there was just a little comment in that really highlighted for me how that works. Like, so like I said, in the last 2 weeks I was doing this really hard work, and I was super stressed. Like, I lost the vibe hard out. Like, I was real like just dark, you know, like wasn't sleeping properly, was real just like there's too much expectation on me. I can't carry this, it's too much. Like, just really exhausted and go, oh, why should I have to deal with all this crap, you know? Like really losing it and going like, I'm not the one for this job, this isn't me. This is like, I'm just making it up, we need a professional. And then the way that the vibe got saved was my colleague, you know, Ben was like, hey Rich, you look stressed, do you want to go have a drink? You know? And just the offer, like for starters, that was like, half the problem was fixed, because it was like, someone else has noticed, you know, like there's someone looking after me. And so yeah, like each of us loses the vibe all the time, all the time, and that's why you have a group, you know, that's why you have a group, and they look after you and they go like, hey, I think you should take a few days off, or let's go climb a tree, or like whatever it is that you do. You know? And as we've gone through this over all this time, it's like I've got a pretty comprehensive like diary in my head of everyone's stress triggers and how they respond when they're stressed and what to do to intervene. Like, you know, you build up that catalogue in your head when you get to know people in a real deep way. And so it's like I know that when I'm stressed, I will like try and take over, just do things my way because it's a lot easier than trying to negotiate. And when Ben's stressed, he gets into the state where he can't make decisions. He's just like really indecisive. And so when I see Ben being stressed, I'll go work with him and we'll make decisions together and we'll like click, 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 click. And it's like I can go around the whole all 17 of us and tell you, you know, like what the recipe is. And you just, it's not, yeah, it's just like we've just learned that by paying attention to each other.